welcome to episode 54 of Storyteller Conclave, a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game you can, whether you're a new storyteller or a dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Rob.
And I am Sarah.
And strangely enough, we are not in the same room. So we may sound a little different too, so...
I was feeling a little under the weather, so due to an overabundance of caution, not knowing if this is, spring allergies or, pandemic plague, we decided to, just play things a little safe today. So I am remoting in, so if things are a little weird and a little off kilter, we apologize for that.
Yeah, definitely.
But we figured the show must go on, so...
Yep, so we're still here, we're still together, and we are still doing a show. And we're going to try and not let it suck. So, that being
I'm
said...
sure it'll be fine.
Yeah, so, needless to say, we are healthy as we can be, but we are cautious as we can be as well. So, hopefully, by next week, this will all have passed and we'll all be fine and back to doing this. But either way, we are trying to bring you the best show that we possibly can. So, with that being said, today, Sarah... we are doing a show on Law and Order.
Law and Order.
Now, we can't do the dun-dun, because otherwise we are literally going to get sued into the ground.
I don't know, I think it's a meme at this point, honestly.
It kind of is, but I don't think it's hit to the level, because they've actually supported it enough that, like, if we used it, like the Xerox term, we would totally get nailed. But, regardless, it is something that, like, is weird, because so many times in games it isn't brought up unless it's specifically necessary, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we throw around the term murder hobos a lot.
Yeah, we do throw that around a lot.
You know, referring, of course, to a group of hobos, about a bunch of, wandering vagabonds with no, particular place they especially call home. And the murder part, of course, is pretty self-explanatory. They solve every problem by killing it judiciously until it stops becoming a problem for them.
Yes, exactly.
And when you're murder hobos, sometimes you can run afoul of the law. And, even if you're just doing regular stuff, you can run afoul of the law. But, especially in situations where, you've given your characters swords and every solution starts looking like a target dummy to them.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And so you start asking the question, where is the law when you need it? And how do you bring the law in? The town guards obviously taking issue with them doing vigilante justice on the streets, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah,
here we are.
Yeah. So I guess the place where I kind of want to start a little bit is like defining what the law kind of is in games that we don't get to see. Because I know a lot of times when I'm looking at games, unless it's a major city, in a fantasy world, there really isn't a law. There isn't. I mean, there's law for certain individuals, for perhaps ones who, have wealth or standing or their own garrison or what have you. But for the most part, like in the fantasy feudal worlds, there really isn't much law. There's guards,
I mean, there's a lot of might makes right. And you'll also see local laws with local constabularies and stuff like that. So a town might have something akin to a sheriff,
sure.
or something like that they decide what kind of goes in their village, regardless of what the the larger kingdom laws are or something like that. But
I mean, let's take for instance like D&D as a whole. I mean, when we think of something like Neverwinter, there is guards there. There is a legal system within Neverwinter. And yet, a lot of times it feels like they are merely background. They don't have an active role in things. You don't hear a lot about them within the stories or even the reference. And the last time I think I looked at a Neverwinter module, it didn't even touch on who would come if bad things were happening in town besides the guard who might show up.
Well, I don't know much about Neverwinter, it's particularly, but there's, in fact, Sean's writing it in the live chat right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 2 games going on in Waterdeep right now, both being run by Sean, and there's the Code Legal. And he even started off his Dragon Heist game by essentially reading us the Code Legal and kind of setting the groundwork for okay, look, this whole game takes place in Waterdeep. Don't expect to murder hobo your way through it. Here's what you have to deal with, you know.
Right. Here's what everybody knows is the laws of the land. And
Hmm.
I think that's good. 7th Sea kind of sets that in motion with the Swordsman's Guild, is that if you enter into one of the guilds to learn a sword school, you also must follow the rules of the Swordsman's Guild, which is that you don't kill people. You duels are only allowed to happen in sanctioned situations, or under, defense. So it's a very touchy kind of situation when you do draw a sword or a gun on somebody.
Hmm. Yep,
So
absolutely. And so it's good to put the things out there and kind of figure out what the legal structure of the game is and stuff like that. But it's a completely different thing to then bring those consequences to bear, I suppose.
true, true.
All right. So outside of fantasy, what other sort of legal systems are we looking
I mean,
at?
we got like more modern contemporary ones, which can range from your typical like small town police if you're dealing with like something like a Cthulian kind of thing where it's happening in like, backwoods town. You might have like one or two sheriffs who have to follow the law when really they're just kind of controlling things themselves, all
Oh
the
yeah,
way to
yeah,
like
yeah.
downtown Chicago, where you've got a whole police force and SWAT and choppers and things like that. So, you do something terrible, and they're gonna notice and probably have a response time that's pretty decent
Hmm.
to get to a location. Like, just as likely if you're breaking into a security facility, maybe a major corporation or something that's connected with federal agencies in any way, or banking, that response time might be even faster, and more so you might actually have local guards who are then going to do different things than the police would do to try and contain it. I'm willing to bet right now in the background, Mad Elf is going, I understand what local law enforcement and small group law enforcement does because he was involved in that stuff
Oh yeah, yeah,
in a
yeah.
campus setting. So he understands what that can be. And in fact, I remember playing in a game with him where that kind of came about, and we had to deal with law enforcement and handle those situations of a little bit of procedure. So I think what it gets to me hearing whenever I think of modern stuff, I think of very much there's procedural law and procedural order that happens out of them.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's about right. I also kind of really like that, in kind of all these settings, but I think in especially in more modern settings where, um, especially like your Shadowrun sort of settings or your World of Darkness settings a lot, the police kind of become a tool that can be almost used by the big bad evil guy, or
100%.
or possibly even by you if you play your cards right.
Well, yeah.
Using influence and such like that.
Well, I think even if in some of your like, I even stretch contemporary all the way back to like film noir kind of stuff, where you might be a PI or some kind of side thing trying to do investigations,
Oh,
and the
absolutely. Yeah.
police are actually friends of yours, but they're lazy and they don't want to get involved, and you're just a detective on the scene. What are you gonna do, kind of a thing. I love those kind of pieces where they're a little bit of plot but also a lot of bit of flavor that adds to the framing of the story of good and evil and questionable and those kind of pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime I write up a setting, regardless of its time period, I always make sure that I have an NPC written up for like the captain of the guard or the police chief or whatever's setting appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And always like at least two guards that you guys may run into on a semi-frequent basis, just to give kind of a face to the police force there, so that if and when your party does run afoul of them, you have some NPCs to throw in that are kind of like your major characters.
Yeah. I mean, and then you've got the alternative to all this that we've kind of spoken about, which is like the Judge Dredd kind of police that are out there.
Oh God, yeah,
Where it's
absolutely.
like these laws are done this way because it's the best way to handle the chaos that's just outside the doors of those who wish to who are in power. And
Hmm.
instead of it being where it's like, hey, it's just lawless outside of our doors and we don't care, it's no, we're going to put these guys in the streets, give them the best tactical gear, give them the best things, and give them the right to judge right on the spot. And bam, there you go. Now
Yeah,
now you've got now you've got less of an angry and more of a force to be reckoned with that has true power, unbelievable power at that. And that kind of goes back to the feudal a little bit, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And you could run into that, like especially like in more like fascist or more rules with an
Orwellian.
iron fist sort of. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I was thinking more like strong armed, lawful evil style of rulership. Where it's like, look, we will have order in our streets, and any disorder will be swiftly met with.
Right. Right.
And you'll have like maybe even like paladins as enforcers that
Yeah.
like not only just arrest but smite.
Yeah, like, and here's my justice done, you know?
Exactly, exactly.
So, yeah, no, I
So
agree with that. Go ahead.
So the question I suppose is, there's a lot of different ways of representing uh, the legal system and the justice system and stuff like that. But um, and you talked a little bit earlier, especially like about the Mad Elf, having some real life experience and stuff like that, and bringing real life things into the game.
Mhm.
Um, is that is that really the way you want to play it, though? Is
Mhm.
realistic always your best angle on that?
Well, I mean, I think that if it's if if it's meant to be a gritty realistic moment, maybe. But a lot of times, like, at least in my history with gaming and listening to people who run games, a lot of times the law is used as a leverage point for the storyteller. It gets them
Yeah.
to pull things into a track and put pressure in places where it wouldn't normally put. I've seen storytellers who have had the law come into games and take things that were evidence or important relics or whatever was important to the game and take it away from the players so that
Hmm.
they now had another thing they had to go deal with that was more social related, and or subversive to that group, where they had to sneak in and steal it back, or they had to negotiate with somebody else who now has their hands on it, or what have you, or getting caught and having to negotiate that and work out, how they were going to get themselves out of that situation.
Right, 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 right.
Or using it as a plot device where they're framed, you know, and now they've got a whole nother situation involved. Um, but I think there's something to be said about the whole converting, people from murder hobos into more reputable people by, if they're not following the laws that you had set forth, and showing them that these are important things to the society and using the legal system within that. But if it becomes so much that it's a block to the story, is it a good idea?
Right. I mean, I think anytime you bring law enforcement in as a response to the party doing what D&D parties do, I suppose, um, you run the risk of start turning it into like a party versus the guards sort of story.
Right.
Because then like they're already a group that solves problems by killing the problems away,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're bringing guards in as a response to that. And now all of a sudden it's now they're just, the guards are just the new targets.
Right. They're not actually doing anything to change the direction of the players.
There's no contrition. There's no there's
Right.
no reflection.
No, no. They have no investment in them. So what's the point?
Yeah, they're just more nameless NPCs,
Right, right.
and whatever, they're hobos, so they'll leave anyways. They're just gonna skip town for the next town or whatever.
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
so I think that the trick is, if you are going to bring in law enforcement, is to make it compelling, and you also kind of have to address the power curve as well,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times adventurers can call down some pretty extreme powers, and if you're you know positing that your law enforcement are just average Joes who watch the streets and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
you got to you've got to walk that line between realism, and believability within your setting of these are just people, they're just average guards with probably 6 hit points and a suit of chainmail,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not
versus
adventurers.
Right, versus the what they what they tend to do in video games, which is make the guards have 3 billion hit points,
Right.
and deal 1 billion every hit
Mm-hmm.
to dissuade you from trying to fight the guards.
Yeah, I think back to games like WoW, where like the guards of the city, if you went to go walk in, as a human into the Orc City, you were just getting laid out like kitchen tile. You
Yep,
know, you,
Elder Scrolls Online did the exact same
yeah,
thing, which
yeah.
got really tricky when they introduced the ability to thieve things.
Mm-hmm.
Because oh yeah, they got real mad if you stole the wrong stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess it's a if you're gonna use them in that way, I think you've got to do like you were saying, set the laws and rules down early in the game, make it part of the world, and make that part of the world very obvious. I know one of the Seventh Sea storytellers that I read opened one of his games with a side scene, that didn't necessarily involve the players, but involved something that the players knew, and that it ended up in a hanging.
Oh
And it was
wow,
and it was wrongful. It was a wrongful hanging, but it showed the power of an individual over this kind of security that was in the area, the guards that were managing the
yeah.
area, that they
Yeah.
were in control of that, and so these players would basically had the chance that not only they could be hurt, but people connected with them,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
so that changed how they had to navigate the system. So yeah, definitely changes once you know the scape, and at the same time it's reinforced very quickly.
I think the other important thing too is to engage with law enforcement on a social level rather than a combative level.
I agree.
Because like I was kind of saying earlier, you don't want the guards to become the new targets. So if you engage in a social level, and this is kind of harkening back to why I always make up the guard captain or the chief of police and like one or two guards to be the face of the law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
because that way it's one thing if it's like, oh, four nameless NPC guards, run into the room,
Mm-hmm.
and they roll initiative. But it's another thing if it's like, okay, so you know, Guard Riley and Guard Jonesy walk into the room and they're like, "Oh, it's you guys again." And now
Right.
suddenly you've got a face, you've got an attitude, and it's a lot less likely that they're going to turn on guards that they know, guards that they've talked to before, and just start killing them away.
No, I agree. I totally agree. And it's at the same time, if you engage with them on a social level, they're also going to be communicating with other people that those guards now know. And I think
Yes.
to that degree, like, I think the social level can also come from the framing of like all these people now know them, they respect them, and then they come back into town maybe after 2 weeks or whatever. They think things have blown over, and there are post wanted posters up. There are now bounty hunters in town, looking
Mm-hmm.
for them and asking questions, and like so they go back to like the bar late at night. They're like, "Hey, Phil, can you let us in?" He's like, "Hell no, I can't let you in. I just had four bounty hunters here trying to either pay me off or rough me up to get information on you. Get the hell out of here. I want nothing to do with you." You know?
Right. You guys are kind of persona non grata right now, and it's
Yeah.
only because I know you and I like you and you bought me a beer once that I'm not turning you in myself.
Right. So building that reputation up changes everything at that point.
Yep, absolutely. And that might harken back to something like reputation, where burning some rep might be how
Mm-hmm.
you end up getting out of it. But
Yeah.
at that point again, it becomes a resource exchange for you.
Right.
You know,
Right. And I
you
think
mess up and now you have to expend some resources to get back out.
right. I'm thinking to Roger Rabbit and the bar scene, where they're hidden in the back room. And
Oh
she's
yeah.
risking a lot because she understands what it means to hide them, from him, and how the power that he has over even over that area.
Right.
So
And
so I
then there's
think
that construction worker guy, and he's like, uh, you know,
I'll tell you
oh
where.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll tell you where the rabbit is.
Hmm.
And Eddie Valiant is like, see, I told you he was gonna rat on you. He's like, yeah, no, he's not gonna rat on me. He's not gonna rat on me. Why? Because I made him laugh.
Yep. Yep.
And sure
Burn a,
enough,
burn a little rep, and there you go.
he burned a little rep with him. Yep.
So yeah, I feel that like there are as many ways to play the physical card as there is to play the social card in this, but I think
Yeah.
it's good for both players and uh, characters on the same regard. You're whether or not you're doing it. Um, on the other hand, and this is something that we really don't talk about, is the NPCs being affected by it. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
it's rare that a villain gets affected by the police, but in action movies, a lot of times you'll see situations where the hero is trying to get away and somehow turns them into, uses the cops to stop them, and now they're stopped by the cops. Now granted, they're going to get out of it, of course, but that gives the heroes time to get away, kind of moments like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
those kind of moments are really good because then you can use that social knowledge of the area and yeah, those urban skills to say, oh, well, I know that if I keep doing this and these kind of actions, it's going to draw the attention of the guards. And maybe I can use that to turn the guards on these guys because they're going to do something that's illegal, like draw a blade in public, you
Yep.
know?
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
And sometimes drawing those eyes is exactly what the actual true villains in the story don't want. So
yep, yep.
yeah.
So, another thing, which is always funny,
Okay.
is the walking into uh the Brutes bar. Like, hey, you're trying to get away from the police, and you go into the one place that hates the police.
Oh.
So now
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have friends, but you have enemies of your enemy working with you to solve a problem. You know, and
You run into the bar, the cops follow close behind. Every Hell's Angel
yep,
in the bar stands up.
yeah,
You a pool cue gets
and
gets dropped.
and I think that's a different kind of law enforcement because we're thinking of law enforcement as badge wearing defenders of justice, when really law enforcement also includes like Hell's Angels who run an area of a town, or a different villain's territory, or maybe a local rogues guild that has defense on an area, or a biker gang like a Go gang in Shadowrun. Like those are different kinds of law. It's
Yeah,
their law
yes.
in that area, and sometimes you can still use that to your advantage in storytelling. That maybe they're not. It's not necessarily that they're good, but they're there as another law tool. You know,
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, that's I would say less law, more enforcement,
I agree.
but you're not wrong at
Yeah.
all. Like that's 100% local law enforcement, and it's not always police.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at something Sam, or it wasn't Sam who was posting it, was it Knox's story that he was writing up and adding to? I got to go back to the story discussion.
Probably technology.
Technologist story, that's what it was. And in it, he was kind of throwing around some almost Malifaux ideas. And I think about the factions of Malifaux, that they're really not necessarily a law and order side of Malifaux, but everybody has rules and things that they're controlling. And it's a very chopped up world, but at the same time, there's a lot of factions to be playing with who has control and who can enforce certain areas and things like that.
There is, but you're actually wrong. Malifaux does have a distinct law and order
Oh, it does.
faction, but it's definitely rules with an iron fist. Arguably, the bad guys of the story, sort of
Okay.
law, and that is the shoot, their name was on the tip of my tongue. But anyways, they're the ones with the death marshals and stuff like that.
Oh,
Lady
gotcha.
Justice is part
Okay.
of theirs. So they the guild. That's what they are, the guild.
Okay.
And so they essentially run everything there because they're the ones who are running the entire soulstone mining operation, such like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones in technical, legal, and financial power.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else is kind of a rebel faction against them. But like I said, they're arguably the bad guys because they are so exploitive and and such like that. But at the same time, they do have things like the death marshals who, go around and hunt the undead with extreme prejudice and such like that. So it's kind of are we the good guys or are we the bad guys? Do we hit a little bit too hard? Are we Judge Dredd?
Yeah.
Or and is that okay in a wild, weird west sort of setting?
Right, right, right. And then, I mean, I guess that brings itself to, if you do get caught for a crime, what kind of punishments? And are those even meaningful to stories?
I
Putting
think they I think
characters
they
in jail or making them do community service.
I've seen it work. I've seen it work.
Okay, all right.
Knox in a Box asks real quick, does mob/mafia law count as law? It absolutely does.
I would say it depends on the story, like at what edge of the law. But yeah, I mean, in a story where everyone is working for that. I mean, if all your players are working for an assassins guild, and that assassins guild has laws and rules and policies that they follow, then that is law.
Yeah, and think of John Wick.
Yeah.
John Wick, at one point, he runs afoul of the Assassins Guild, and the Assassins Guild levies out some harsh, judgments on him and punishments, and lets him know, like, okay, this is you're no longer welcome here. Everybody, your name is persona non grata. You can't spend your currency within the guild anymore, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's a perfect way of looking at it.
and that had nothing to do with the actual legal system.
Right. Right.
So, there's some really good stuff like in The Godfather, in Yakuza settings and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely.
I think even in lighter settings than that, I think if you've got situations like where, maybe your players are working in a much more concise system of even things like unions and such. I think those internal rules and stuff can get you in the same kind of situation. So I
Sure,
think it all
absolutely.
it all depends on the scope of the game and how prevalent and relevant those groups are to them. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
yep, yep, yep.
So you were saying though, sending a character to jail and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was thinking back on instances when I did see this happen, and it's actually happened a couple times in Critical Role,
Mm.
both campaigns,
Oh, okay.
um, where a character just ended up in jail. And no, I think it's a mature enough group in Critical Role to say that, like, okay, this happened. This is the consequences and whatnot. They ended up having to actually go and bail this character out.
Mm-hmm.
There was one time where, like, pretty much the entire group got arrested, and it pretty much took all their money to bail themselves out, and even one person kind of had to call in a bunch of favors, which burned. So it was not only monetary, but it was also reputation, essentially, that they were
Right,
burning.
right. And I think depending on the situation, and especially in D&D, I think reputation becomes much more relevant, but it is less of a number that you can see.
Hmm.
So, but
But yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it can be done.
yeah,
I think the important thing is, again, to make sure that the players know that it's not a combat encounter, that this is just legitimate consequences of some actions. Um, but also that it's not like that submitting to law enforcement isn't like the end of your character. It's
right.
literally not the worst thing that could happen. You can literally just spend the night in jail.
Mm-hmm.
They'll maybe let you out the next morning and be like, all right, you served your time, walk it off.
Right,
Don't let us see you back here again or something like that. But
right.
it happens.
Yeah. I mean, and then you've got, I saw that you had listed on here the possible antagonist. And I think you and I both have an affection for Les Mis.
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. So bringing in law enforcement agent that sees them as an irredeemable threat,
Yeah.
someone who is, in fact, Sean has an NPC like this in the not the Dragon Heist game, but the other game that Knox in the Box is in with me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's this NPC from I want to say it's the group called Harbors, and he is constantly looking in on us and, like, basically, like,
He's
trying
waiting.
to catch us with our hand in the cookie jar.
He's waiting for you to mess up,
Yeah, like, my
like,
character
because he'll
hates.
be there when you do. you know?
Right, right, exactly. And the justification is essentially that we are, we're powerful adventurers,
Hmm.
and powerful adventurers start getting big ideas about what they can and cannot do, and what laws apply to them.
Right. And I
And
think, like,
he's seen it before, and he sees that we have the potential for that kind of power, and so he's just, like I said, just waiting in the shadows for us to mess up.
yeah, I think on the other side of that, you've got somebody like the antagonist in Red, the FBI agent, who's basically trying to go after them because he doesn't know what's going on, but
Oh, right,
he's been
yeah.
told that they're dangerous and they have to be taken. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so he's
Mm-hmm.
believing to do the right thing and following the rules as best he can, but at the same time keeps coming against this impossible group and figuring out what he's going to do about them right up until the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think characters like that make for some really interesting role play opportunities because first of all they're a great opportunity to do the antagonist that isn't a villain.
Hmm.
A good guy antagonist, which is just a trope that I love. Like a lawful good, person who's constantly a thorn in your side and a complication in your plot,
Hmm.
and finds you maybe like facing off against the villain, and you find that one moment where the heroes and the villain are in some sort of compromising situation together, and that you take that moment to like, and the door opens and the law enforcement dude walks in
Right.
and
Right.
sees you together with the villain and goes, "Ha, I knew it, you
Yep.
are in league with him."
Hmm.
And now you've got, not only you have to fight the villain, but you also have to kind of fight the antagonist, but not really because he's not a bad guy. You're
Hmm.
just trying to keep him out of the fight,
Yep.
you know.
Or you've got somebody like Admiral Norrington from Pirates of the Caribbean, who, believes the person is wrong and anybody affiliated with them are wrong. One of the characters, and then as he goes on, he loses everything and has to basically turn
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
becomes more evil, if you will, and goes in league on that side. And I think those kind of stories are interesting too, where you literally the heroes create a villain, who's
Oh
just
yeah.
trying to
Oh
do their
yeah.
job. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Uh,
fun things.
Now the other type of punishment that I like to use other than
Hmm.
like jail time and fines and stuff like that is community service.
Okay.
You have a party full of adventurers who are fully capable of taking down monsters and whatnot like that. Well, why not leverage that? All right.
Right.
So your punishment for your crime is to go down in the sewers and fight the phase spiders that have been, warping in
Oh
there
yeah.
or something. Or we've got three guards have gone missing. We're trying to investigate some goblins in these caves over here. Obviously, they've gotten too big for their britches. So, if they're too big, then obviously you guys will get your punishment that way. But if they're not, then you'll have done us the service of getting rid of the goblins. Good luck.
Yep. Yep.
And no, your pay for this is we don't send you to jail. No.
Right. Versus the, we can't kill you, so instead we're going to drop you in this desolate area, and your death is, sitting in the desert or whatever,
Yes.
or
Yes.
walking the desert, and you've got those kind of situations where the punishment can lead to other things, you
Hmm.
know,
And
maybe.
and again, it continues the story.
Yep, exactly, exactly. Well, do you want to jump on questions since we have a bunch and
We
they're
have a
all
ton of
really good
questions.
questions?
Yeah, let's get on questions.
Go ahead and grab one.
All right, let's see here. We'll start right at the top. Okay, so the Technolich asks,
Hmm.
do you ever find yourself grabbing pieces of a wait, is this an old question?
That was the one from last week.
Oh yeah, okay. Is it still on? Did we answer it last week?
I don't think we did. We could go to the next one that he's got there, which is really good.
Okay, so what are some of the strangest laws you have used or seen used in a game? Oh,
I've
I
got
don't
one.
know. I mean,
And
Okay.
7C comes up with some strange laws, especially in towns. But one of the things that was the strangest law that I saw in a game was in one of the, of course, French cities. Uh, they had a law that uh, you couldn't, like, basically they had you couldn't wear white after a certain day,
Oh, okay.
and that certain colors were for certain classes. And literally, it was kind of a catch moment, because it was used as a faux pas. Like when somebody we did a fashion, like someone did a fashion check and basically saw that they were dressed appropriately enough, and then because their failed check was they had a pin that had some of the color on it,
Oh.
and it caused a problem, which actually caused a much larger issue in the end. But it was just a really weird law that the storyteller had thrown in, but it seemed like oddly appropriate based on the situation and how everyone was dressed, and like they laid the groundwork out for everything right up into it, and then we were all like, "Oh man, are we getting caught in this? This is hilarious." So that was my weird one.
Yeah, I don't. Honestly, nothing's coming to mind. If only because most of the games that I've played in or have run in the past, I've tried to keep the laws pretty straightforward, just so
Hmm.
that it doesn't become a weird complication that kind of draws away from the plot. Because my plot has always been something that's been not having anything to do with the legal system.
Right.
So it's always been things like necromancy is bad, mind affecting spells are bad.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sort of things. And yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with strange laws.
Straight up, just don't play Paranoia. Next.
Oh God, yeah. Computer didn't say. Report for termination, citizen.
Yep.
All right, so Samantha Gay would ask, I've never thought about creating an actual laws in a world that players have to, but might not follow. Is there a way to go about making some for a homebrew, or add some of your own to a pre-created? Sure. There's, I mean, I think our own legal system stands as a great jumping off point for that.
Hmm.
So, you want your big ones on there of, don't resist arrest, don't murder, don't steal,
Hmm.
breaking and entering, things like that. But what I would do then is also look through the various, factions and powers and whatnot that
Yeah.
are in place. So, like, take Dungeons and Dragons for example as
Hmm.
your major thing here. Take a look through the spell section and think of the legal implications of some of those spells. So, charm spells, that are mind affecting like that. Obviously, like dominate person, things like that. Uh, those are taking away someone's free will. So are things like that going to be illegal? Is necromancy illegal?
Right.
Because obviously that involves things like grave robbing and, raising the dead, violating dead bodies, let alone living ones.
Hmm.
So you want to think about those sort of things. Um, you also have a situation where you've got armed adventurers.
Hmm.
All your characters have swords or shields or staves or bows and arrows or whatever's going on there. um, you may want to think about what it is that the town has as far as peace binding rules,
Hmm.
or
I think
whether
like
they even
the
need to check their weapons at the door.
that's what I was just thinking. Like, start if you start small and in a town, like the first place they come to is like an inn, and when they walk in the inn, there's literally a brute behind like bars, and he with a slot that basically says no swords or bows, leave your weapons here.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can get them on the way out.
And
But
it's real sensible too. I mean, you're in a
hmm,
space with alcohol.
yeah.
Like uh, you, bar fights are one thing, but bar fights can turn lethal real damn quick.
Hmm.
When swords are just readily available.
But I would say focus on the types of people and the air and the atmosphere, and then think of the most chaotic thing that they could do to each other and try and ramp it down. So like if it's an assassin's guild, first rule of Assassin's Club, don't shit where you eat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In within the guild, everyone is the same. We're all equal, we're just getting jobs here. And you could say within 50 feet of the property, kind of a thing like that, where it's like we don't make hits on each other. It's just professional courtesy, you know. You
Yeah,
know, it,
absolutely, absolutely.
we don't accept hits like that. We only accept hits here. It's got to go through channels. It's got to do that. If you do a side hit, you are persona non grata and no longer welcome in, your coin is useless, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
thing. And those are the kinds of things that start the law bowl rolling with those types of groups. And you can often get players to follow very strict rule systems or try and be very close to them if they want something that's at the end of that chain. If they want to get into that group, they might be willing to follow those guidelines to get closer to where they want to go.
Yeah, and one other thing to keep in mind too is that your powerful, like kind of jumping off that, powerful groups are the ones that set the rules.
Hmm.
So if you have an especially like tyrannical ruling party or a king or something like that, they may be levying strong taxes on certain things. And these, I mean, these are laws just like anything else. Is that you have to pay X amount of extra coin for certain, services, certain goods.
Hmm.
May be extraordinarily heavily taxed, or they may have things like sumptuary laws, where like Rob was mentioning earlier, that you would have rules on what colors you can and cannot wear
Hmm.
during certain times and stuff like that, because and this comes from real history, like wearing purple or wearing red
Hmm.
would denote you as a member of the peerage of the royalty or the nobility.
Yep.
And so if you wore red or you wore purple, you could be seen as impersonating a noble.
Yep.
And so that might be something to where a certain color is off limits or a certain color is required.
Hmm.
So all these things just kind of think about. I wouldn't get too deep into things unless it's really kind of a running theme of your game that law and order is a theme or even potentially the conflict in question.
Yep.
Uh, but those are some really good jumping off points there for some just basic rule system.
Yep. And likewise, if you've got a society that is constantly being sacked or attacked or or being involved in the hijinks of whoever's, bringing stuff in, for instance, maybe your adventuring group when they go out deals with a bunch of crap, but then when they come back, some of that crap follows them back in. There's nothing that says that the town doesn't start creating their own rules of like, don't bring that crap back here. We want nothing to do with you.
Oh God, yeah, a no adventurers rule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could see it. I could see it
Yeah,
happening.
there's nothing quite like having a cleric on his knees in a church while fighters are rushing in the doors to come after your players who are getting healed, screaming, "Not in the church! Not in the, no
Mm-hmm.
blood should be in the church," kind of a thing. So, all right.
Box in
So,
the Box says, "I'm a monk. I am the lethal weapon."
yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
It's a well known fact. Knox in the Box cannot put his hands in his pockets, actually,
Hmm.
because it's considered concealing a lethal weapon.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Mad Elf says, not so much a question, but a wax philosophical on the integration of magic, psychics, and superpowers on game's legal framework. When no one can lie or get away with one, what does that do to criminal activity?
Oh yeah, this is a subject near and dear to my heart because it's kind of the entire underpinnings of a faction in Aberrant.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's a group called the Terrigen in Aberrant, and Aberrant, for those of you who have not caught other games or are not familiar with Aberrant, is a modern day kind of superheroes game, but
I
it
would,
it runs
yeah.
very more gritty realism, sort of like the Boys
Mm-hmm.
style thing, where not
Watchmen.
everybody's a four color. Yeah, not everybody's a four color good guy superhero in
Right.
tights. This is average Joe's sprouted superheroes overnight, and what do we do with that?
Yeah.
And there's a whole faction in there called the Terrigen, and one of the big things about the Terrigen is that they're very much almost like if you're familiar with the X-Men, Magneto's sort of outlook on things is that mutants aren't human anymore, and therefore shouldn't have to really follow human societal rules and laws.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. Very much like that.
And but it kind of comes down to the question of like, okay, so if I can phase through solid matter, what is your jail sentence going to do to me?
Right.
You know, like I don't exist on the same realities. I don't follow the same physical rules that you do. So why should I follow the same legal rules that you do?
Right.
And it really really, asks some pretty interesting questions of what does superpowers do to the legal structure, and do you then end up coming up with special laws for the whole group as a whole, novas or mutants or whatever you want to call them,
Right.
and at that point, do you have to tailor the punishment per person, who then decides what's just?
Right.
And do baselines, people without powers, get to decide what just treatment of a nova is?
Right.
Or should it be a jury of their peers, other novas? And at that point, should other novas just have their own legal system and their own, society?
Yeah. Which begs to ask the question: should they not even be there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Once I started digging into the Terrigens' whole philosophy on things and stuff like that, they stopped being weird, weird comic book villains and started being like, oh crap, these guys are really onto something.
Yeah. I mean, it's good philosophy and understanding, but it really messes with it. I think Rifts did the same kind of problems with the Psychers and magic, and how basically they were trying to get control of a world that had gone chaotic. The coalition as a whole, that they were
Mm-hmm.
basically police stating every square foot that they could, much like the Empire. I think of I would say visual reference in Star Wars. That for the most part we get the feeling that they're trying to control the universe and bring order to the chaos that's out there.
Sure, sure.
Same thing in Firefly, and I think that when you start stepping to things that are just outside of that are outside of their control, the Force, magic, psychic powers, it it brings them harder down on it, and I think that was shown in X-Men just as easily.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, nice Overwatch, very very solid.
Yes, this is Overwatch posts in the chat here. Perhaps there are some novas who prefer to stay with the baseline herd for the warmth and comfort it provides. I say obtain your warmth from equals. Humans do not require the companionship of monkeys, and likewise, novas do not require the companionship of baselines.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep, very
And
very well
that's,
put.
yep, right straight from Divis Mall.
Yep. All right, so Knox has a question. What about worlds where PC's mere existence is illegal? Think of mutants and Days of Future Past. How do you create safe havens and inspire hopeful gameplay in settings that can be such constrictive and oppressive? Is the whole concept just a bad idea? I don't think it's a bad idea. I think that it definitely um, leans hard into a much more gritty world and people hiding. I can remember D&D games where we had races or classes that were outlawed, um, and players who were playing within those. I mean, I think to a degree, a lot of people feel that warlocks as a class are kind of outlawed because of what players know about what can come of that. The idea of mixing, your rights with demons and letting them slip through.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I think
Um,
anytime you run into those, I think safe havens can help bring down the scope of the world by putting uh using the oppression and of the concern as a gray field, that a no man's land, if you will. Where now everything has to be kind of covert at times. I think X-Men did that really well, where it was like, you'd pinhole your way through existence going from point to point to point, because you can't just work in normal society with all of your power set. You kind of got to hide.
yeah, well, that was a pretty big running theme in our early TMNT games,
Hmm.
also because we didn't play after the bomb for most of them, and so we were contemporary, modern, and mutants were another strangeness.
Yeah.
But as far as is the whole concept just a bad idea? I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily. I just
Mm-mm.
think that you need the right group for it, and I think that you all have to be willing to tell that story and get involved in some pretty heavy concepts and stuff like that. And I know a lot of groups, uh, in fact, I think probably mine included, uh, really want to go to the table to tell a story to escape from the harshness of reality,
Mm-hmm.
not to embrace it.
Yep.
So I would say, it's not a bad idea if your group is looking for that type of story. There can be a lot of catharsis to be told in that sort of story, especially if it's therapeutic for someone because they've had an experience like that, or they come from a demographic that is confronted with oppression on a regular basis. Uh, to have a character that can freely navigate that and tell a story about victory under those conditions can be really good.
Totally. I totally agree with that.
So it's not a bad concept. It's just like I said, you just need the right group and the right players for it.
Yeah. And sometimes you can use something like that as a pre-session to a much larger campaign to test things out. Or if you're trying to figure out how you want something to roll through. I mean, a lot of people have worlds that started in oppression and change because of events, and there's nothing to say that you couldn't have the players play out those events.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Got one
All
from
right.
Overwatch there too.
Yeah, we got a question here from Overwatch. Campaigns as police procedurals. Have you ever done anything like this, or anything where the player characters are the law and order? How do you go about setting something up like that?
I've set up games, but I haven't run them yet. In 7C, where I'm using musketeers. Um, I think
Oh,
the
okay, okay,
closest I
okay.
got to it was the Children of Heroes game, where you guys were the guard. And helping people and taking care of things in Freiburg. Um, was about as close as I got to that, but it wasn't very procedural. It was closer to Harry Potter. Um, but I think police procedural would be fun. I think, but not necessarily for everybody. I think it's good for stories, but I think once you get multiple players involved, it can get kind of boring for some of those players, depending on who they are. I mean, you can only have like one Magnum PI.
That's true. I actually ran a small game like this. It didn't last simply because we had a bunch of different sessions where people were just not able to show up because real life got in the way and stuff like that, and we just decided to call it quits in the game.
Right.
But for a while there, we had we actually started off as first level PCs.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran it in a town. One of the main characters was a paladin of the Church of Justice.
Okay.
Justice was one of the gods, and so essentially, the church was the judicial system.
Okay.
And so she was a police officer essentially, and uh, she was able to deputize the rest of the party
Mm-hmm.
to go and basically I used her as the main plot hook of like, oh hey, this is going on, can you look into it? And then she was like, oh well, I've got these powerful friends who can also help. Can I deputize them? They said sure, and off the party goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really great actually too, because then I was able to add in some other aspects of how the police were kind of on the take, and there were these like vigilante, justice sort of people going on inside the church, and there were some really good opportunities for role play in there, and it actually worked really well. I'm kind of disappointed the story didn't go further.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to um uh some of the more uh team cop movies where
Mm-hmm.
you've got stuff like geez, I'm starting to lose track of some of them in my head, but the stories where you've got a main character who is primary justice or someone who's looking for justice, and then them going and picking up people they knew who would assist them in taking care of this problem, you know, and that kind of stuff could definitely give you that same kind of regard,
It
you
kind of
know.
that almost like burn notice.
Yeah.
Although I mean he's not a cop, he's a spy, but it's sort of that he he's got his own problems, but he's also got these very qualified allies he can call in, and so they tend to be the team, even dealing with Michael's problems regardless
Right.
of what's going on.
Right. Right. Or you've got stuff like God, what am I thinking? Tombstone or
Yeah, 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 yeah. Tombstone, where he's
Tombstone's a
got
good.
Doc Holliday
Yep.
there.
who again is pulling together a gang,
Mm-hmm.
of people
A
to go.
posse.
Yes. The other one that I was thinking of is with the one with Sean Connery and Kevin Costner, going after the mob. Uh,
Oh, Untouchables.
Thank you, thank you. I was losing the name,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's another good police procedural where you've got someone, you've got different people who are all coming together, and I think the Untouchables does a good job of bringing in other types of people. You got
Yeah.
an accountant of all people,
Mm-hmm.
involved in that group, but you've got effectively, your hard-nosed detective, you've got another detective who clearly, has a very different feeling about law, who's kind of running things, and that's where things get interesting, is that you can run stories like that. Um, and I think that you can, looking at some of those, you can definitely get a feel for where they're going to go. But I think they're very player driven. I think a lot of those stories, you usually end up with a lot of drive and direction from the players and what they want to
Exactly,
do.
especially when you get a very diverse group together like that, and you give them the freedom to make their own decisions.
Right.
Uh, that's, I think, the important thing. I think that the main pitfall with running as a police group is that you're going to have them always answering to the police chief
Mm-hmm.
or guard captain or whoever that might be. So I think it's important to give your players the autonomy to go out and make their own decisions, so that they don't feel like their entire thing is on rails.
No, but I think the opening of Rails and Law, where you've got a chief who's yelling at them, who's like, this is how you're going to have to handle these things, and we're not going to be able to get this kind of stuff done, and then they walk out the door and just do something different, is pretty much every police procedural movie, you know,
That's true.
where it's just
And
like,
you're
yeah, you guys aren't
3
gonna,
days
yeah,
3 days from retirement.
exactly. And I think that kind of stuff is fun because they understand the rules that they've got to follow. But at the same time, they also understand that they could bend the rules to get where they want to go. And then, of course, at the end, you're going to have police like, you just took out 2 city blocks and killed, and wrecked 14 cars. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost the precinct? That kind of shit,
He's a
And I think,
lone wolf that walks to the beat of a different drummer. He only
exactly.
knows one law, his law.
That's right. That's right. Give
He's
him
a
a gun and he's under
powder
control. Give him 2 and he's deadly.
he's a powder keg balanced on a knife's edge.
What does that even mean? What does
I
that
don't
mean?
even know. It's something Sean said to me once, and I've been laughing about it ever since.
It's pretty fantastic, honestly. Yeah, Overwatch, you're a good
You're a
cop,
good cop,
O'Malley.
O'Malley, but you're a loose cannon.
Yeah, I think The Incredibles is a great example of that as well. I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's perfect, where you've definitely got, you've got an agency that's watching them like, please don't destroy the whole damn city. Can't you just get a job and like settle down,
Right.
have a kid? So, yeah, I
Yeah,
think.
and there's the question too. I remember from there's a plot in the Flash comics back in, oh God, the 80s, maybe early 90s, something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
Where they kicked the Flash out of Keystone City
Okay.
because they were basically deciding that, like, we have a superhero here, and that means that super villains come here to fight him. So if we get
Yep.
rid of the superhero, we'll have peace and quiet.
Right. And I think that's a really good way of looking at that, is I think you definitely get that kind of thing. On the other hand, you also get situations like Seven Samurai or Samurai 7, where you've got a group who are like, we don't have any justice, and this group is enforcing, and we need you to come and handle it.
Mm-hmm.
This daimyo is just murdering, just stealing from us constantly, and we need that taken care of. And now you've got that kind of band coming together, or being built and coming together. And I think that's a great way of looking at that too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can go a lot of great places with that.
yeah.
All right, so it looks like we're probably coming up on the end of the show
this
here.
is it. Our next week's topic is going to be on stereotypes, class, and reputation, handling details of racism, classism, and appearance. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, Instagram at @ST_conclave. Obviously, you're listening on MixLR right now, which is mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And please check our Twitter for our Discord links and information there, and join us, like many of our people here, in our live show chat and online.
I would like to give a big shout out to our Patreon members, Knox in the Box, Sam, Arcane Asylum, and so many others who've helped support the show every month. Thank you so much for continuing to make this possible. We love every single one of you. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find him at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. And our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find her on soundcloud.com/midairmachine or on freemusicarchive.org.
We'd like to give a great shout out to our families. Vicky, Sean, thank you so much for letting us do this every week, and all of our friends who play 7C with us on other games, and you, our listeners. Thank you so very much.
We love you.
Love you
Good
guys.
night.
Good night.